said, Knoxville's my home away from home. I've spent more time here than home in the last few years. And until recently, until the pandemic, it kind of kept me grounded. But as far as like murals is what I'm really known for, and tattoos is what I'm really known for, and not often enough is there a crossover between the people who know me for one or the other, which is kind of funny. Even in my city, in Philadelphia, where I have entire buildings that I painted, people will be like, I thought you tattooed. I'll be like, yeah. Or I'll have people hit me up and be like, this is actually kind of funny. So I painted a couple murals that people hit me up asking if I would mind if they had a version of that mural tattooed on them.
And what was your response?
And I was like, yeah, I mean, that's cool. It would just be weird if I didn't do it. And they're like, you tattoo? And I'd be like, yeah, I've been tattooing for like 20 years. I've only been painting murals that you've seen for like 5.
Right.
You know, but I think it's just because it's an art that's like in public's face.
For sure.
It got more known for that, but like it's kind of bittersweet. You know, it's like, cool, you recognize my artwork and you like it, but like I've made this other artwork for more than half my life.
Right.
You know.
And you know, being on the side of a building on Interstate 40 is a great place for people to see your work. Like, it's visible from the interstate. So that's definitely not a bad bit of real estate to have your work on.
I think it's interesting. There is a crossover in that artwork that, and a lot of my tattoo friends have pointed this out to me, and I never really took much stock into it, but they're like, oh, of course you can paint these giant murals because you've done giant tattoos your whole, like, you know, I mostly do like sleeves and back pieces and bodysuits and stuff. And I'm like, it's all the same to me. Like, I don't really think about it as big or small. I just want to create a piece of artwork that fits wherever I'm putting it.
Yeah.
Whether that's up a hand or an arm or a back or an entire building, the size is irrelevant. And I think size intimidates people.
It can. I've seen people shy away from big projects.
Yeah, but granted, like with tattooing, of course, like that big project is totally relying on the client to show up and continue to put the dedication and the work on it. But like when it comes to buildings, I mean, maybe over the years, like my perception of what can be done has also evolved.
Well, if it didn't, I'd be worried.
Yeah, I mean, like I remember like 10 years ago, I was telling my friends, like, I was like, man, I just want to paint a mural where I need to use like a scissor lift. I thought that would be cool, you know? It's like going up above a story. And then I used one and I'm like, oh man, I just want to do a boom lift. And then it's like, I just want a 10-story building. You know what I mean? Like, but it doesn't seem impossible now.
Right.
You know, I can look at it and gauge like, all right, I'm going to need this much material. It's going to take me this much time. Like, but the design itself, that process has never changed.
Right. Because the idea and putting it out of your fingertips as a concept it's the same process regardless of the end result, or exactly. If you're sticking it on a wall or in somebody's skin, it's that workflow doesn't change. It's the execution that changes.
Absolutely. And I try to keep the same creative problems in mind. What I mean by that is like composition. You know, I always want a composition to, for me, it's important. It's not necessary, but for me it is, to accentuate whatever I'm putting it on, whether that is a person's body or a building. And like a lot of people are like, how can a building have, like, you know, it's a rectangle for the most part. And I'm like, yeah, but what direction are people seeing it from? Right? Like, what's the flow of traffic or foot traffic or car traffic? Like, how far away are people looking at this on average? And that is what dictates my composition.
So would you like walk around the block or drive around the block and just scope out the building from those possible angles?
Yep. And then like what is the best or most frequent point of view? That's what's going to dictate my composition. Right. And like, yeah, that's just how it works for me.
That's a good place to start. I really feel like you're taking the stance of the viewer is a good I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
They don't. You know, there's no rules. There's no rules.
Right.
You know, you make something. That's the end. But for me, I have rules for myself. And it's really important for me to make sure that artwork looks like it belongs there. Right? And like, you can make artwork stand out. You can do that. But like,
but it doesn't have to not fit.
Yeah, I want it to fit. You know, I want to add to the visual landscape, especially with murals, the visual landscape of that environment. I want to add to it. I don't want to like explode it. You know what I mean? I also don't want to hide it either. I want it to feel like it belongs there.
So you want somebody to be walking down the street and be like, oh man, but not like, oh God,
Yeah. I mean, we get bombarded with billboards all day long. These like, these designs that are specifically arranged to punch you in the face. All day, someone trying to sell you something. And like every once in a while, I just want to make something that's just like nice to look at. And you're like, it's like a breath of a fresh air of just like cool. And like it doesn't hurt your brain. It might make you giggle. I don't know. Like that's cool to me.
Right. I appreciate that. That's pretty solid ethos on that. I don't feel as if that's a common stance on a lot of work. I may be wrong, but you're the first person I've heard say that as far as like large scale murals go.
There's another thing too, like the majority, and I would say like 90% of my subject matter is nature. And I find it really interesting and fun to play with the juxtaposition of taking nature and putting it back on man-made objects.
Honestly, that's one of the things I enjoy about your work, because you take these big inorganic structures, in urban places, wherever they may be, and you put animals on them, you put flowers on them, you put natural things on them in a place where you wouldn't expect to see a representation of natural beauty. And I appreciate that juxtaposition a lot. That is probably the most entertaining aspect of your work to me, on top of how you execute it and how aesthetically pleasing it is to me. Just the juxtaposition of this context in this place is massively entertaining.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. And as I was telling you earlier before we hit the button, this was one of those interviews or conversations. I prefer to say conversations, but people say interviews, whatever.
Conversation.
Also, it being a conversation, you're welcome to ask me questions, because this is two ways. But this was a question I put out into the ether on the old internets, and somebody yet again said yes. So here we are, sitting in my super secret studio, talking art and shenanigans. I guess I'll go ahead and do the intro now, since I totally didn't do that. My name is Thomas. This is a KAAMP, the Knoxville Area Artist Networking Platform, and today I have Evan Lovett. Evan, will you please give yourself a more thorough introduction?
Yeah, my name is Evan Lovett, and I consider myself to be a conservation artist, meaning my subject matter usually has to do with wildlife and conservation. I'm also known to be a tattoo artist for the last 20 years, but I've never really considered myself a tattoo artist. I consider myself an artist that tattoos. And a distinction between that is my artwork is not based in the world of tattoos, right? So like when I do a painting, it looks like a painting. Tattoo artists that I love and admire, when they do a painting, it looks like it could be a tattoo, right? And I regrettably admit that I am not a tattoo artist, right? I wish I was, because
to blur those lines isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, no, not at all. I just I was an artist before I started tattooing, and I was an artist while I was learning how to tattoo, and I've worked in almost every medium. Went to a fine arts school, college, for 4+ years, and so yeah, I'm an artist that tattoos, and I envy tattoo artists. I wish I could just do that.
Why do you wish you could just do that?
There's a simplicity within the genre, and that's not knocking it. It's not easy to do. The simplicity isn't easy, but finding and distilling your subject matter down into a simplified style just takes a knack that I don't have, and I envy it, because everything would be so much easier if I wasn't running around doing a million things.
I have that luxury and also feel that pain. I feel as if I'm one of those creative people that's got a lot of irons and a lot of different fires. There's always something cooking, Mm-hmm. I feel as if it's a luxury, but it can also be an inconvenience.
Yeah, it's a double-sided coin for sure.
Yeah. So if we can go all the way back, when was the first time you remember being a creative person?
I have always drawn my whole life, and I don't consider myself to be a naturally creative person. And to get into that is, I have myoptic vision. I can't see past my nose without corrective lenses, without glasses or contacts. And it wasn't until I was about 6 that they figured that out, right? My family didn't know, school didn't know, so I got all the way to the 1st grade before anyone realized I couldn't see shit.
Oh, man.
So they figured it out. They got me some glasses, and 2nd grade was a lot more interesting.
I bet.
The world was a lot bigger. You know, I remember looking at a tree and being like, holy shit, there's a whole bunch of little things that make that big green blob. And I got obsessed with details, right? Because like for the first time ever, I could see them not having to be right up on them.
And you were cognizant enough to be able to recognize and understand those details.
Yeah, but I also didn't know that I was missing them. So I became
Right.
fascinated with details, right? And I think since then, the majority of my artwork is observational based. You know, I see things, I like them, I figure out why I like them, I try to interpret it in such a way that other people might be able to see why I like them. I don't have an empty well of creativity. I'm not making shit up. I'm looking at things and then translating it. And I have friends that do both. And like, I envy the artists that have that deep well of creativity where there's just an entire world inside their mind. I don't have that because I was just so magnetized to the world around me because for the first time I could see it.
Yeah.
So I started drawing mostly because there wasn't a lot of kids in my neighborhood growing up and I was an only child. So just to keep myself occupied, I drew. Also, at a young age, I wasn't active because I didn't want to bump into shit all the time.
Fair.
So I kind of just like sat and looked at what was in front of me and drew it. I got a lot of attention for it when I was a kid. And I think I liked the positive attention for the drawings I made. But I never considered myself like an artist. It was just a thing I did.
Yeah.
Then when I was 14, I got burned really badly.
Oh, no.
Yeah, first, second, and third degree burns on almost 30% of my body. And my entire right arm, neck, face, chest. And when I was in the hospital, so it was like one of the most physically traumatic things I've ever been through. One of the worst things I've ever experienced.
That's pretty gnarly for anyone.
Yeah, but I think it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
A lot of time to think.
I was in the hospital for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And when I was in the hospital one night, I was thinking about like what was real in my life, you know, like most of the stuff people knew about me up until that point were like lies or weird. I used to lie a lot when I was a kid. So I thought it was fun to see how people worked, right? Not trying to convince them of like to make myself look cooler or whatever, but just like if I say this, what happens? Like I was always like experimenting with like people's, I don't know, reactions. And it was like a fun, interesting thing for me. Also, being blind from a young age, I wasn't like emotionally reactive because I didn't know what faces lined up with what feelings because I couldn't see anybody's faces. So like I had to learn that later in life. Like I had to like play catch up with that. And I found it to be more like fascinating than like organically like reactive, you know? So anyway, I started thinking about like what people knew about me. And most of it was like a lie, right? Or like some weird fabrication or something they made up in their own heads about me. Like no one knew the real me, but I also didn't know the real me.
Well, I mean, you're a kid, so it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, I used to think about stuff like this a lot. So I'm laying there and I'm like, all right, what is real? The things that I drew are real. Even if I drew from another person's drawing, like if I was like copying a comic book or like a cartoon or an illustration that I liked and I was doing my own version of it, I still drew it. Like it was created by my hand. Nobody could say that it wasn't because people could see me do it. And it was only as good as it was. Like it represented itself.
Yeah, there's no line.
There's no line
about that.
Yeah. And like, so I was like, okay, that's real. It's a real thing that I did and there's like evidence of it. I was like, okay, if that's the only real thing about me, then an artist is what I'm supposed to be. And I don't mean like from like a higher power, like ordained, like laid out in front of me, but I mean like that's what I should be doing.
Right.
So I dedicated, like I promised myself then, I'm like, all right, motherfucker, like you're an artist. Learn what an artist is and be that in every aspect of your life. Treat everything as if it is an art, right? You can learn it, you can master it. And from that point on, that's it. Like no more lying. I started practicing radical honesty, and even people didn't want to hear it. Which
that's
honestly,
just as bad as lying sometimes.
it is, but it was actually more interesting to me to see how people reacted to the truth than reacting to a fabrication.
Oh, it's far more interesting.
Yeah, because people don't know what to do. Right? They're like, "What?" And so anyway, I started practicing radical honesty, and I started studying as much as many forms of art as I could, and like just absorbing all this information, and just dedicated myself to that. So again, didn't think I was a creative person, but I just became a sponge for creativity.
So that what would you say that was more of a discipline act for yourself?
Absolutely.
In that scenario?
Yeah.
And where from there did you dive in? Like, were you... Okay, let me rephrase that question. Like, what mediums did you dive in first with that headspace?
I was really into pen and ink, just like the hard contrast of black and white. I used a lot of rapidograph pens and like different forms of calligraphy, but like I really liked old school etchings and like pen and ink work. So I got kind of obsessed with that. Also, I was into comic books from an artistic standpoint, and I really liked the inking of comic books more so than the color. So I did a lot of pen and ink drawings, constantly just drawing, mostly just things that I saw and trying to reproduce it in a linear form. And then I was introduced to tattooing when I was 15. Right? My dad introduced me to a tattoo artist who liked my drawings. And granted, at 15, I probably looked like I was 18. And I was just like, I grew fast.
Yeah.
And he invited me to his tattoo shop. And I was like, all right. So I had my mom drop me off there. Okay? So I was like 15. I was like, yeah, I want to go to my mom was like, what? And I'm like, I don't know. He invited me.
But trust me.
Yeah. So my mom shows up with me, and this dude, he was a phenomenal artist. He was a classically trained artist. He could paint and draw anything. And he was an airbrush artist as well. And when we walked in, he was standing on a table airbrushing this mural on the wall of, I think it was like a Native American scene. There was like a buffalo and like a soldier and a wolf. And he's already like 6'3", 6'4", big beard, big long-haired biker. Dude looked like a Viking. And then he's standing like 4 feet up on a table, and he has a respirator mask on.
Yeah.
And he hears us come in, and he like turns around and jumps off the table, and the whole floor rocked. And my mom's just like, what the fuck? And I'm like, this is awesome. Right. And I mean, my dad's a biker too, so I grew up around guys like this, but I never grew up around guys like this that were good at things.
Right.
So I'm just like looking at all this like fantasy art and paintings just everywhere. And I was like, this is cool. So, he introduced himself to my mom, and he was like, yeah, just have him hang out here, look at art stuff, and come pick him up later. Mom's like, okay. Boom.
Sure,
Peaced
I'm out.
Yeah. So I hung out, and like I was looking through he had amazing books of like fantasy illustrators, and like he was really into Frank Frazetta, and like I was just learning about Frazetta, so I was just like, whoa, this is awesome. And like Jeffrey Jones and all these other just like Boris Vallejo and like Judy Bell, like all these amazing artists. This was his reference. This is what he liked. And I was like, this is cool. And it wasn't a traditional tattoo shop. It was an all custom shop. There was no flash on the wall. He hand drew every tattoo from scratch for every appointment.
That's amazing. So
like it was just kind of this like weird hole in the wall art source for me. And I loved that. I hung out there all day.
Was this in Philly?
This was in New Jersey.
Okay.
All right. So my mom brought me back the next day. I think it was like summertime. I didn't have school. Mom brought me back the next day. I was hanging out. He was showing me how to draw some stuff, some like skulls and just like, whatever, stuff like that. And showed me how some of the tools that he used, right? Like for tattooing, but didn't show me anything about tattooing. It was just showing me stuff. I was hanging out. I was like, okay. Then my dad brought me up there one day. This might have been like a week later. And, the guy's name was Mike. So Mike goes, hey, come up here. His station was like up a couple steps. And he was like, come up here and bring one of those skulls you drew. And I was like, okay. So my dad and him are up on the second floor. And I get up there, and he's like, yeah, I want to show you how to put a stencil on. I'm like, okay. So we made a stencil out of the skull, and I put it on his leg. And he goes, okay, now tattoo it.
On him.
On him. Right?
You were on the spot.
Yeah, I'm 15, right? And I'm looking at him, and my dad's looking at me. But like, I was raised around bikers. No one's going to like call my bluff. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm not going to get punked out. I'm like, all right. So I put on gloves, and like, I'm like, what do I do? And I'm sitting across from him, and he had his machine and stuff set up, and he goes, pick that up. So I pick it up, and it was so heavy, right? Yeah. And I was like, all right, now what? And he goes, step on that. And I step on the foot pedal of the machine. Yeah, the machine starts buzzing. And I was like, oh, man, all right. Like, in my head, I'm like, all right. He's like, dip it in ink and then draw. And I'm like, okay. So I dipped it in ink, and I start outlining the skull on his leg. And I just pulled the whole entire outline without dipping in ink more than once. So it starts off nice and black, and then it just gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. But mostly I think he just wanted to see if I had the balls to do it.
Yeah, because that's on somebody else and it's permanent and all that jazz.
Yeah, and I don't give a shit. Again,
Wasn't your leg.
Yeah, I was raised by bikers. I was like, you want to do this, we can do this, you know. And my dad drugged me in the tattoo shops when I was a kid. Like, it wasn't all new to me.
Right.
So I get there and he looks at it and he goes, all right, cleans it off. And he shakes his head and he's looking at me. He's like, here's the deal. You come here every day after school. You do good in school. And then you come here.
Right.
And you stay here and you do everything I tell you until it's time to leave. And you come back the day. And if you can do that every day, I will teach you how to make money making art for the rest of your life. That's how he put it to me. And I was 15, so I was like, making art for the rest of my life. Sick. You know, I didn't really care about the money part.
Twist my arm.
Yeah. and making money from tattooing really didn't come till later. You know, but the sacrifice of every night of my life, every weekend of my life for almost 5 years, like all through high school, you know, like I didn't go to parties. I didn't hang out. Like I had work. I had to go to work. I'd be at the shop. So I was there every day and like, it was a sacrifice of time, but it wasn't a sacrifice to me because I was making artwork. Yeah, every day. So, and he taught me how to draw quickly. He taught me how to draw directly on the skin, which is something I mastered later. But yeah, he gave me a really good start into a career that he didn't give a shit about. You know, like I mean, at that point he'd been tattooing for like 30 plus years, and he was like, this is how I pay my bills. Like,
man, here's all the tools.
Yeah, he didn't care about the art of tattooing. He didn't care about the culture of tattooing or the industry of tattooing anymore, if he ever did. But
yeah.
And some of that bitterness was starting to like rub off on me, or like at least inhibit me from like really learning more and really exploring the medium of tattooing, right? Because like at that shop, I just got stuck doing these like very random, like his scraps, or like I had my own clientele too, but like where we were was like a very isolated kind of like small hickish town, which, hey, I love growing there, but as an artist, it was stifling.
Oh, I know all about that.
Yeah. So, so I was time to move on. I was going to art school at the time too. I was going to college.
Yeah. Where'd you go?
I went to the University of the Arts of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And first I went for illustration because I thought it was mostly closely related to my career, right? But I ended up falling in love with sculpture, and I ended up transitioning and double majoring in both illustration and sculpture. So
you've got tangible 3D stuff.
Yeah, I found out I was good with my hands, and actually sculpture I think influenced more of my tattoos than illustration did.
Well, being able to envision how these things and the light falls and the shadows and the shapes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I could turn an object in my head and see how the light would affect it, and that's why I think my tattoos look the way they do. They look very sculptural, or painterly, in my opinion.
Yeah. I feel like your color palette has a lot to do with how painterly they work.
And that happened organically, and it wasn't anything I tried to do. It just kind of happened, and now I'm trying to pull back a little bit and like simplify my palette, use less colors.
That's a fun challenge.
It is. Yeah, but I mean, after I've been tattooing for 20 years now, and like after 20 years, you can see what tattoos look like 20 years old.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So I'm simplifying what I do so that they look the same for the next 20 years, and they don't like slowly change into like less of what you wanted. You know, pulling like when you're young and you're experimenting and you're trying every technique you can, and you just want detail everywhere and highlights everywhere, and just because it looks really, really cool. And then in like 5 years, like, all right, I used 4 shades of red, but you can only see 2.
Yeah.
Still looks good, but like it looks good with 2.
The effort and the time.
Yeah.
And
so why not just use 2 from the jump and have it look the same for a long time? So like those are the kind of things you learn after time. And people can tell you that 100 times when you're coming up, but like it doesn't sink in because you don't see it.
Right.
All right. So yeah, now I'm simplifying. I'm like pulling back a little bit, going a little bolder, going a little smoother.
How big of a challenge is that for you?
It's fun.
It is a challenge, but it's a rewarding thing.
Yeah. I mean, like when I have time to really prepare for a tattoo, like by prepare, I mean like prepare my motive, like think about the intent of like, all right, I specifically want to do something a little more simple, a little more like still want it to be dynamic, but like have it be a little more ornamental or decorative as opposed to like really bold and dynamic and graphic. I have the time to like play with it. But then sometimes I'll do a walk-in and I'd be like, hey, I want this thing. And I'm like, all right. And I just sit down and draw something.
Right.
And that drawing naturally comes out complicated. Right. Easy for me to draw, but like complicated. And I'm like, oh, wait, I was going to simplify. Whatever. It still looks good. Like this looks great. They love it and I do it. So like, yeah, if I have the time to like really like force myself to simplify, I could pull it off. And I'm happy with it. It's fun. But yeah.
So that's one of those time, intent, purpose. Let me do this, meet this goal with this piece.
Yeah, I kind of break everything down into like systems and procedures. I like lists and like writing down ideas. And then it's like, okay, like giving myself criteria and rules to follow. It's fun. It's like problem solving. And back to your original question, like when did I consider myself to be creative? Never. I am naturally a creative problem solver.
So you enjoy a more rigid aspect that has its own ebbs and flows. Like every problem is different. You enjoy the differences of every problem.
Yeah, I apply my problem solving to creative endeavors. You know what I mean? Like, how do I make this drawing look cool? That's the problem.
Yeah.
But if you're like, draw something cool, I'm like, like I'm just gonna draw something I drew 100 times.
So how do you feel about looking at a blank page? Do you get intimidated? Is that a window of opportunity?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. It's more canvases than a piece of paper, but
page. Air quotes.
air quote page. Right before I start to do anything, in my head, I'm like, fuck, you don't know, like, how do I do this? Like it's something I could have done 1,000 times. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
Do I feel like that when I step foot into work every morning and then it's just like, oh yeah, I did this all week last week and the week before that and the week before that.
Every tattoo, every drawing, every mural, every painting, I'm like, how do I do this? Like, I don't know. Like, you build up a thing in your head. It's like, people think you're good at this. Fuck, there's like a level you have to reach. And I learned a long time ago to I don't hesitate. I still have that feeling, but I don't hesitate.
Yeah. Especially
with a painting or a canvas. I will look at it and I'm like, oh fuck. That like daunting feeling of like, this is a thing I have to do. I instantly dip my brush and paint and then just touch the canvas with it.
And then it's done. Like,
and then it's like, well, now I got to fix it. And then you just go into, your muscle memory and all those little tricks you've learned over the years until it looks good.
Well, I find a lot of comfort in the procedure even after, I've had that, oh shit, like, how do I do this moment? Because, I work with, beaters and $1 million sports cars and all the stuff on occasion. It just spans the gamut. And the process is the same. Like, you take your file, you print it on the vinyl, you put it on the car, but inside that process is the freedom to literally do damn near anything.
Yeah.
And that lens onto that problem or that vacuum is empowering in the way that, with these tools, I can do whatever it is that I desire or the customer desires or, whatever my end result needs to be.
I really enjoy working with younger artists too. Like when I'm guest spotting, if I'm traveling, even at my own shop, I like working with the less experienced artists or an apprentice, like people who are really hungry for knowledge because there's so much that they know they don't know, but they want to learn it. And, after 20 years, whether you're good or not, you're going to know some shit, right? And when you teach or explain something to them, something that's so second nature and so easy to you, like you're like, huh. And like you don't even have to think about it because it's second nature and their mind is blown. And then sometimes I'll say some shit that I'm like, actually, that's really good advice. Like, I forgot that I knew that. Why don't I do that more often?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there's so much stuff that I overlook because, again, it's second nature. And I'm like, no, if I focus more on the advice that I'm giving and, like, re-put it into my work's going to be even better.
Yeah.
And that's like working with younger artists always does that. If you're around a bunch of people that are at your level of experience
and they're
like,
comfortable,
yeah, like you'll be like, how you do it? I'm like no one cares, you know what I mean? Because that's just what you do. But
I'm fortunate enough to work with a ton of creative people that are very experienced in their field. And a point of view that has helped me a lot. I've had a lot of different jobs, man. I've worked for tech companies. I've worked for glass blowers, and now I wrap cars. So I've been all over the gamut. And one of the things that I've consistently kept about myself, no matter where I go to work, is that I am always the dumbest man in the room. Because if I am the dumbest man in the room, there is more for me to learn than anybody else in that room.
Yeah.
And I know when to shut up and when to pay attention, which is most of the time stay quiet and only ask questions when you need an answer. And, just if you act like you're the dumbest man in the room, you're going to walk out of that room at the end of the day learning more than literally anyone else learned that day otherwise.
I mean, that's great advice.
It has worked for me in every position I've ever had, no matter the industry, no matter my boss, no matter my job. I'm one of those people that loves to be curious and loves to ask the silly questions, even though it may be too silly. Just what is the answer, because I'm curious. And of course, there's a time and a place to ask those questions, but always like my curiosity and knowing when to shut my damn mouth work really well together, because I just naturally pick things up, and I only ask questions when I can't just pick the thing up. But always being the dumbest man in the room has never served me poorly.
I think there's another way of looking at that too. For some people, you have to force yourself to be uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right. And sometimes just asking a question is uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
Or like admitting that you don't know something is uncomfortable.
I think that's
right.
That's as a basic experience of being human. Yeah. Admitting some degree of fault is uncomfortable.
I think one of the reasons for whatever level of success I have as an artist, one of the most beneficial things is not being I don't have a fear of failure. I never have. Like, I don't mind fucking something up. Granted, I don't want that thing to be a tattoo, but
right.
I don't mind it not turning out the way I hoped. I don't have that like obsessive need for everything to be perfect, because I learn so much more from my mistakes than I do my successes.
Yeah.
Every time. And I've always had the mentality, I mean, honestly, this is probably a double-edged sword as well.
Always.
I've always had the mentality that whatever I'm doing is practice for the next time I do it, right? And it's like, I don't know how many people would say that's a good thing. But for me, it is. Because, when I'm working on it, I'm going to do the best that I can. But I know in my head, I'm like, if I do this again, it'll be better.
Yeah.
Right? So,
sure.
I don't mind fucking up.
So I'll give you an example that happened this week at work.
Lay it on me.
So we had a customer who brought in a really nice blue 370Z that it's his track toy, and he's like, hey, put some silver graphics on this thing, like streaky, splashy kind of things across the hood and up the driver's door and across the rear end and all this stuff. Basically just gave it a two-tone graphic. And my coworker did one side and I did the other side. And they're different. They fall different. The way two people apply things are different. Even though they use the same tools and the same thoughts and methodologies, they turn out different. And
was it supposed to be symmetrical?
That's the shit that gets me right there. Yes, in theory, but in practice, it doesn't always go that way, because cars aren't symmetrical side to side.
Right.
And how things fold and the subtle differences in the sheet metal and this and that aren't always the same. So, we try and plan things when we tape them on the car to lay them out. We try to get them as symmetrical as possible. But when you peel the backing paper off and you go to stick it just doesn't fall the same, because some door gap might be different, or this body panel fits different from one side to the other, blah, blah, blah. Name the variable. It's a car. There's 1,000 things that could be different left to right. But, the saving grace in that is you can't see both sides of the car at the same time. Sure. Hey, that gets said a lot in my head, that you can't see both sides of the car at the same time. Now, if you looked at this and were being very analytical, you would say, hey, that piece of silver doesn't land on this body panel the same way. But if you're just appreciating the car for being a cool looking car, then it doesn't matter because you've got the same look both sides.
Yeah.
So it depends on how technical you want to be. The thing that really gets me about being super accurate, though, is stripe jobs, because people expect those to be symmetrical.
Yeah.
So I've put plenty of stripes on Mustangs and Challengers and all that jazz. And
As vinyl or hand painting?
Vinyl. I do pinstriping and hand painting as a hobby right now because those are skills I wish to acquire and apply later in life. You know,
That's a
matte
hobby
brushes,
that takes years of it being a hobby before.
yes.
Yeah.
So I have no grand, ideas of, I'll start doing this on cars 6 months from now. No. But I'm accomplished with vinyl and I'm comfortable with the medium. So I know I can take a roll of tape, a couple specialized tools, and put a damn good stripe package on any car you roll into my shop. So it is what it is. And I have to be way more analytical about this thing and that thing when I'm doing things that I know people expect to be symmetrical, especially stripe jobs, unless it's an asymmetrical stripe job, and then it's whatever.
Yeah.
But it's those scenarios that show me like how technical I can be and how fluid some other aspects of the process can be or have to be depending on the application. So it's just one of those things, and it's good that we can find those parallels.
Do you see that in any other aspect of your life, like a non-creative aspect, like taking the same analytical approach?
That's a really good question. I try to use the lenses, metaphorical lenses, that I've grown to discover or have implemented in my artwork, and I try to put those in other aspects of my life. And sometimes those just aren't the right lenses, but sometimes they are. I always try to look at things from an objective perspective as best I can. Now, emotional attachment and all those other things as part of being human can really skew that, but you have to be objective about being objective too. So that's a double-edged sword. But I really honestly try to take a step back and look at everything, whether it be something I painted 6 months ago or I just finished it, or it's a conversation I had that was a little tense with somebody. I generally try to look at these things from some quote unquote third party perspective to see, like, was I the asshole? Was that the thing the person needed to hear? Was I being supportive? Did I, fill the role in the scenario that I needed to? So I do try really hard. And as a human being, I fail occasionally, but the important part's that you try. And I feel better about the things that I apply those methods to than when I don't. And sometimes the artwork comes out better when I paint V2 or paint over V1 and go at it again. The stylistic iterations that I practice tend to get better when I analyze them in such a manner. And then interactions with people as a subject in society and my friends and, my personal relationships, they also seem to be more fruitful when I apply that ideology to it.
That makes sense. There's two things that you said that made me think of something. One of them was the emotions, the inherent human emotions and being non-objective. With all of my artwork, with 100% of my artwork, there's never any emotion put into it. And nobody realizes that because people tell me all the time how like emotionally invoking a piece that I'll do is. And like, especially like a mural of like an animal. And I'm like, that's just because I made its eyes look watery. Like that's just like a trick. Like I wasn't trying to make you feel that way. I wasn't trying to make it look like it was feeling a way. I wasn't feeling any way when I made it. I promise. Yeah. Emotions were not a factor for me creating this artwork. But it's like really, I think a lot of people like will project how they feel on it. Definitely. And I find it fascinating. Yeah. Like all the time people tell me how much emotion my artwork, regardless of what it is, like embodies. And I'm like, okay. Right. Like, which is kind of funny. But that also brought me to the second thing you said was creating artwork from a stance. And there's a lot of people, a lot of phenomenal artists that create artwork from an emotional position. They're trying to convey how they feel through their artwork. And I think that's great, especially when it looks great, right? Because in the end, I just only care how it looks. Yeah. That's how I'm a robot. But there's a thing that I think a lot of people overlook when they're learning something, right? Or like just starting off on whatever creative venture it is, whatever medium it is. And that is, and like in tattooing, this is the most obvious. So maybe that's why I apply it to everything, but I find it useful when applied to everything. If you're working in a visual medium, right, of art, whether that's painting, drawing, whatever it is, you are challenged with two things: making it look good, learning how to make it look good, right? Or make it look how you want, I should say, right? Like good is,
good. The good is a subjective part.
Subjective. Yeah, it's like extremely subjective. So, but like when you're trying to learn something, never give a shit about what it is, right? And this is advice I give to anyone starting off. I'm like, yeah, of course you want to do a really cool painting that like you could be proud of, but you don't know how paint works yet.
Process and tools.
Yeah. So learn the medium, learn the craft, do exercises, do experiments, like literal drills with paint so that you can, it's like, okay, this paint at this consistency with this brush gives me this effect. And paint something you admire, someone else's shit, copy it, and then never show anybody, burn it, paint over it instantly. Paint that same thing 100 times, right? Using a different brush every time. Figure out your tools, figure out your medium. Once you got it, apply it to what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of artists, tattoo artists especially, that started off with tattooing before they ever picked up any other medium, right? And they start painting. And they're like, yeah, I'm a professional artist. I've been tattooing for like 7 years, right? Like, of course I can make a cool art piece of painting. And then they make a thing that looks whack as shit because they don't know how paint works yet, but like they make it look good enough that someone's going to like it.
Right.
And I'm like, do you really want to learn how to paint? Like, paint. And it's totally fine for it to not come out good, but like I feel really bad for people who waste their good ideas on something when they don't know how to pull it off yet.
Well, that's exactly why I'm not out there trying to pinstripe people's cars. Like, so I use the same brushes. Mm-hmm. I've got some Max and some Wizard Vectors and script liner brushes and all that stuff. I got a few good ones of those, and I'll play with I'll play with enamel paints when I feel like stinking up the house, and I will probably never say that I'm accomplished at using such tools, but I'll say that I have a comfortable handle on how I like to work those tools. That particular process with those tools, I do a lot of really abstract geometric mandala-esque things, and that's a process that I've done with other mediums and other tools that is healthful for me in a space that I can do that moving meditation wise. I can quiet my mind and produce something that I enjoy.
Get into the zone.
Yeah. And that's healthy for me, just as a mental practice. But if I'm just aware enough when I do those things, I can pick up on the how the tools operate in the process.
I mean, I think that's another really interesting thing too that I've learned creatively over the years is working in a different uncomfortable medium will unlock things in a medium you are comfortable with. Like, you'll do this thing and you're like struggling with it. Like, it'll never get there or whatever in your mind. But you'll be like, wait a minute. And then, like, it's like that aha moment where it's like, that other shit that I could apply this to that. That would be super dope. Like, that happened to me a lot with, like, graffiti and tattooing. I'd be, like, painting graffiti and then all of a sudden, like, I would think about a tattoo design. I'm like, whoa. Level up. I just like,
and it just hits you like a freight train, dude. And those moments I wouldn't trade for anything.
The aha moments are great.
When the subconscious mind smacks you in the face with whatever that idea is, you can't fucking trade that.
I think it comes from being uncomfortable.
So those brushes that they're over there next to that tube of paint right there, those are the Mac brushes I've been playing with, and I've got an airbrush over in the corner because it's those two things I'm trying to learn right now because I suck at both of them. And being uncomfortable, like we're both talking about, is I'll bounce back and forth and play with that for a couple weeks and then pick that thing up for a couple weeks and just go back and forth and until I start to feel comfortable, and then I'll try something else with the other one and feel uncomfortable, and then I'll get okay with that, and then I'll be like, oh, well, there's this thing I saw the other day with those things, and I'll go try that. It's just a constant process of trying stuff and doing and being, and definitely experiencing being uncomfortable because you can't learn a damn thing otherwise. You just can't.
I have a lot of artists that will hit me up, or people that'll come by while I'm painting or like ask me how to get into painting murals, right? Because like, I mean, it's a hot commodity these days is street art and murals, and like everybody wants. I don't want to call it a bandwagon, but everybody wants to have that experience.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, cool. They're like, how do I get into this? And I'm like, I mean, you can just ask someone to paint a mural. But my advice every time is always the same. I'm like, find a practice wall or build a practice wall. If you have a yard or whatever, like a couple sheets of plywood, screw them up, repaint that wall 100 times. Knock on every neighbor's door, ask them if they have leftover house paint, and then you use that house paint on that wall, or spray paint, or whatever your medium is. Paint that wall 100 times.
Till you're tired of looking at it.
Yeah, paint over it again and again and again. Nothing's precious. I don't care how good you think that came out. Paint over it immediately with something else.
Don't even take a picture of it.
Yeah, take a picture of the good ones. That's fine,
Yeah.
right? You paint that wall 100 times, right? And sometimes it could be like the back of your garage, or like, you know, if you're in a neighborhood, find someone that has like a fence or a wall that they'll let you practice on. Paint over it 100 times. Take a picture of all the good ones. Now, not only do you have a portfolio showing what you can do that you can take out to try to find an actual wall to paint or someone to commission you, you're going to learn the skills that it's going to take to not embarrass yourself.
Yes.
On a bigger job, right?
Yes.
And that's all it is. So like every mural artist that has, anyone who's ever asked me how to get into murals, I'm like, find a wall, paint it 100 times. Then come back to me and I'll give you some actual technical advice, because it's not going to make sense to you now.
No, it's definitely not.
No, you're going to have to like figure some shit out, figure out how much you hate it or how much you love it before anything that I say is actually going to stick or be useful, you know? Especially with spray paint, I'm like, I can tell you every trick in a book, but until your finger has the muscle memory to like judge a can, know how much pressure is in it, and like know the right angle and the right speed to move, you're not going to be able to pull this technique off.
It doesn't make sense until
it won't make sense. Go empty 1,000 cans of spray paint on that wall 100 times. Then I'm going to say some shit and you'll be like, oh. Like, there's no like magic tool that's going to make you instantly good at things. There's no special cap. There's no like sketch process, whether it's projector or an amorphic grid or like scribble grid or grid. Like none of that matters until you put in the work to build up the muscle memory.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the same for every single medium.
And I'm inclined to agree. You know, I've got my 10,000 hours with acrylic paints. I've probably got 100 hours with you know, a set of spray cans, and I've got 15 hours with an airbrush. You know, so I've embarrassed myself on an 8x16 wall a few times, and it's never stopped me one bit.
Just keep going.
Yeah. There's an event I participate in Waverly, which is like 45 minutes east or west of Nashville, and it's a tiny little spot, but they have an art park a guy owns, and there's like 80 walls there that he invites people out 3 times a year to come paint.
Use those spots. Use them to build up your chops.
Yeah, definitely. And I've went every time I've had time to do it, and I've painted whatever wall they gave me, and I've enjoyed the shit out of it because I'm with other creative people doing the same thing for the same reason, with all of the opportunity to go screw up.
But that's that. I think like you know, Knoxville has some stuff like that here too. I guess Freak Alley is a little more curated these days.
Yeah, heavily so.
Yeah. But like I run a nonprofit organization too, and
you can plug it.
Yeah, and I don't know if like not many people know that, but I run an arts nonprofit called VURT. VURT stands for Visual Urban Renewal and Transformation. But really, it's just a 4-letter word that doesn't mean anything else. That's dynamic. So anyway, VURT is an art advocacy nonprofit, and why we created is we wanted to give artists a chance to work in the public sector. You know, so like we hold materials, we hold insurances, we have supplies and like equipment that people can use, and any artist that wants, any self-motivated artist that wants to benefit their community with their artwork, we will support and help, right? And foster a mentor, and we even act as like, for certain grants, we can act as a fiscal sponsor, because if an artist has a grant but they don't, a lot of grants will only give the money to a 501c3.
Right.
Like, so we can accept that money on an artist's behalf and then like help them with their project with it, right? So the one major important part for us with Vert, at least, is like, if you are an artist that wants to benefit your community by donating your work, by your art, we'll help you, right? And a big part of that is like these like learning curves. And one of the things that I think, you know, I'll go to towns as a representative of Vert, and a lot of schools. I go to schools often too, elementary schools and middle schools, and talk to them about the different professional visual arts, you know, because there's so many commercial arts that people aren't even aware of, you know. But one of the things I say is like, hey, we want you to paint a mural at our school. How can we have the kids involved, right? Because like that community engagement is a word.
Is a big deal.
It's a big deal, and there are no grants out there that don't have community like that. They all have community engagement as like a prerequisite, but nobody knows what that means
because it's so vague.
It's so vague, and then they always want you to tell them what that means. Yeah. They're like, hey, you need community engagement. Tell us how you plan to do that. And you're like, I don't know. And they're like, well, we don't know either, right? So it's this like fun thing. But I understand the interest in that. One, it sounds really good, right?
And on paper it looks good.
And on paper it looks good. But like if you're talking about a school, it's like, hey, how can we have these kids help paint a mural? All right. And I'm like, how can the kids paint a mural? And I'm like, hey, I love that idea, because it would be really fun for them. And
it gives them ownership.
It gives them ownership, yeah. Now, here's where it goes wrong, right? And there's a solution to it too, so it's not me just shooting it down. But those kids, say they're 8th graders, right? They're going to have a lot of fun for a couple weeks painting this wall. The end result is going to look like shit, because these are 8th graders who don't know how to paint a mural. Right. This is their first time ever, their first experience painting on a large scale on a wall.
With a brush or a can
or whatever, right? They don't know what they're doing. Even if you guide them, it's only going to hit a certain level of good. Now, that doesn't matter, because it's the experience that matters. Right. But then those kids are gone. And then that wall's there forever with every generation of kid who doesn't give a shit about it because they weren't a part of it, right. And it doesn't look good. So you're stuck with a whack mural forever, right? And like I say this to school administrators, right? I might choose my words a little better, but so I'm like, but here is the solution. Bring my team in. We will give a seminar about murals, right? And we do a little bit of simplified design theory. You know, it's like, hey, how to pick a composition. But then we also show them how to come up with ideas. And like that is a thing that you can practice as much as you can any hand skill in creating art, is creating ideas. And we come up with fun games to help them decide that, like, when you stare at a blank paper or a blank canvas, it doesn't have to be a daunting task. Use a formula. Here's a formula, a game that you can play that will tell you what you're now going to draw. And we do this game. We extract these students' ideas.
And that looks good to people that come up with curriculums and policies all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. So like I'll after the seminar, and I show people what can be done, and I explain who I am and why I'm talking to them. We pull out a whiteboard or a chalkboard or whatever, or digital screen, depending on the school. And we're like, all right, we're gonna design a mural together right now.
And you take 10 minutes and do it.
Yeah.
And it's awesome.
You draw a rectangle, and it's roughly the size and shape of a wall in the school. Usually I already know what wall the school wants to paint. So it's like, okay. And it's like, what are some core values that you think represent your school? Give me some words. And every school has like their words, and kids will give me those words, and I write them down on a chalkboard, right? I'm like, all right, cool. What are some objects or symbols you think represents your school? And it's usually the mascot or like some sports related thing, or like books or apples or like whatever it is. I write them down. I'm like, all right, what about colors? What are some colors that you think represents your school? And every school has their colors, so we write that down. I'm like, okay, what color is math? You know, because like, right? And they're like, what? And they're like,
the abstract question.
Yeah, it's an abstract question. There's no wrong answer.
Right.
Right. And whoever, usually I try to, always within a group of kids too, there's one that's ballsy enough to answer, and then they just let that one kid answer. So I'm like, no, I'll call a kid out, because you could tell someone wants to say anything, they're too scared. I'm like, what color's math, right? And they'll be like, orange. And I'm like, okay, why? And they're like, because all of our math books are orange. Great idea.
There you go.
Great answer. That is a perfect reason why math is orange.
They've taken that
because there's no right or wrong answer
and made it tangible.
Yeah. So I write that down. And now we have a board with a bunch of words. I'm like, all right, how can we combine some of these words into symbols? Right? And they're like, all right, so like what's a symbol for math? And some kid will be like a calculator. I'm like, cool. So like I cross out math, calculator, but math in orange, okay? Orange calculator. Mm-hmm. That's what we're going to draw today, right? So like you distill it down into a few key symbols, and then using the design, like the theory of design, arrange those symbols into a composition, right? And it's like, boom, you all, this class, all 20 of you just designed a mural. And like all it is like a sketch. It's not like rendered or anything.
Right.
But like there's a composition. This is going to be a cool mural.
But they see it and they feel invested.
And it's their idea.
Yeah.
And then I tell the teacher, I'm like, look, you guys are going to hire us or, volunteer depending to design this the best that we can because we're professional artists and we know how to make it look good. But we're going to do it in such a way that they can paint it. All right. And they're going to enjoy it, but the end result is going to be good enough for everyone else to enjoy it forever. Here's what else you're going to do. You're going to find another wall, a second wall that is not going to be a permanent mural. And you're going to let the kids use everything that they learned to make up their own. The graduating class of every year gets to repaint that same wall with the help of younger students.
Ooh.
So the 8th graders are going to come up with the design. The 7th graders are going to help them paint it. Those 7th graders, when they're 8th graders, are already going to have a year experience painting murals. And they're going to level it up because now they kind of know what they're doing.
And they've thought about it if they've been thinking about it all
and they've
year.
thought about it, right? And they already have the practice of doing it. They're going to be more comfortable. And then the 7th graders that year are going to get the experience of 2 years of the knowledge that the ones teaching them are going to do. And it's just going to keep upgrading. And the level is just going to get better and better because the bar keeps getting raised.
They're compounding that experience and ideation.
Yeah. And then every year they're going to look forward to having their personal representation.
Yeah.
And it's just one wall. It's not that much material. You're only changing a millimeter of surface. It's nothing for you, the administrators, to allow them to do this.
Yeah.
And you don't even need me anymore. Right. So like that's the solution to community engagement.
Man, that's an excellent solution. And a lot of my family is our teachers or instructors or academia involved in some form or fashion. And I'll tell you right now, as an 8th grader or a high school senior, being able to do that would have been a huge catalyst to what I was exposed to growing up in a town with 2 stoplights trying to be a creative person. That would have kicked me in the pants so hard, and I would have loved it. So that's a great idea.
It's about exposure.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate as a kid that I was exposed to a lot of art. I mean, granted, I was 15, I was exposed to tattooing, right, which has been my career for 20 years, or 22, right, if you include my apprenticeship. So it's exposure. My dad, with all his faults, exposed me to everything in this world, good and bad. Didn't hide it. Didn't put a veil up. He would go, see that? That's some fucked up shit. And I'd be like, yeah, it is. But like it wasn't a shock for me later.
Right.
But he also exposed me to a lot of professions and a lot of professionals.
Yeah.
And I understood that hard work was necessary, but I also understood how many options of hard work there was.
And how enjoyable, quote unquote, hard work can be.
Yeah. It's I don't want to say enjoyable. It all sucks, but it's satisfying.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more important to me than satisfaction. Like I don't ever give a shit about being happy. Satisfied. If I feel unaccomplished, I can't sleep. I don't eat. Like I just watch the clock tick, and I'm like I'm wasting time. And that's just me personally, but it's exposure. And when I go to these schools and I talk to these kids about all the different professions, they didn't even know existed, and it always starts off the same. Every seminar starts off the same. So what is an artist? I ask them a question. What is an artist? And like 1 or 2 kids raise their hand and they'll be like a painter, or like they'll name a couple like arts that they know. Maybe one of them will be like someone who makes art. And I'm like, exactly. But what is art? Right.
Yeah. And then that abstract question all by itself starts the conversation.
Yeah. And I'll make a list. I'll make a list of everything that they named and everything they didn't. And then this is my favorite move, right? It only works at schools that don't have uniforms, but I'll point at one kid and I go, "You see your shirt?" I'm like, "Yeah, your t-shirt." At least 3 different types of artists, most likely 4, had a hand in making that shirt. And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "It took a fashion designer, right? It took a fashion designer, which is a visual art, to decide what fabric it was going to be made of, what shape it was going to be made of, and how it was going to be put together." That was a decision that an artist made. Then it went to a graphic designer or an illustrator that had to come up with the image that's on it, right? Then it went to a screen printer to put it on the shirt. Those are 4 different types of professional artists that all had a hand in making your shirt look cool and making you look cool. And then another thing is, like, every single thing in the world that isn't nature, an artist had a hand in creating. Like, someone had to think about it. The car you rolled to school in today, an artist figured out how it was supposed to look, and then an engineer figured out how to make it work.
Yep.
Right?
100%.
Yeah. I'm like, the tiles on the carpet on this floor, an artist had to design what it was going to look like, and then it went to a manufacturer to make it.
Which, you know, how many people had their hands on it at that point?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, the seats you're in, designed, like industrial design, that's an art. That was something they taught at my college, industrial design, right? Like everything every single thing in the world that's not nature, an artist had a hand in creating. Without us, this world would look really boring. Really boring.
Very boring. Very damn boring.
Yeah. So, like, there are so many options out there. And, like, I think it's interesting, like, I mean, people can't see what I look like now, but tattooed head to toe, right? I stand out a little bit in a crowd. And when I'm talking to these kids and they're not looking at a person in, like, a tie telling them, like, how to live their life, like, they see me wearing sneaks and a t-shirt, and, like, even if I'm wearing a button-up, but, like, I stand out. I'm like, look, I'm successful. And, like, I show them places I've been. I've worked in 35 states, 9 countries making artwork, right? And I'm like, I've been all over the world. I get to look how I want to look. I get to talk how I want to talk because I'm good at what I do, because I work hard at it. And you can too. Like, you don't have to fit in a box. You can build your own box. It can have 37 sides. It doesn't matter. But, like, you got to work hard at it. But, like, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
And, like, I think having someone who looks like me, who probably looks like their older brother, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Probably
Like,
right,
yeah, like, they're not shocked by me. The administrators are.
Because
like,
they're the ones in the ties.
Yeah, but like the kids, they don't bat an eye at the tattoos. They hardly even ask me about them. They don't care. All right. Sometimes if they see my tongue, they'll ask me about that, but I try to, like.
You have it split?
I have a split tongue.
Ah, yes.
So, but, like, kids don't even notice that either, right? They don't care.
Yeah.
They're just interested at the big pictures that I'm putting up, and I'm like, yeah, you can do this too. I can show you how. It's just a trick. Well, I couldn't do this at one point until I learned how to. So, like, getting over that fear of, like, it not coming out good is another thing that I think emerging artists need to get over. You know, that, like, that fear of failure again. Draw a picture, crumble it up and throw it away, immediately draw it again. Crumble it up, throw it away, immediately draw it again. And then the 4th time you do that, it'll probably come out suckier than the 2nd time, but the 5th time you do it will come out the best. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to get over that. Nothing's precious. And it took, I think, painting graffiti for years for me to realize that nothing's precious. Like, you can put so much time into a thing that's just going to get painted over tomorrow because you're not supposed to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
You're not supposed to be there either.
So, like, you can't get mad that it's gone, and you just learn to, like, it's about the process.
Yeah.
And that's what you enjoy.
Well, one of the things that really stuck with me, you know, I used to work for Local Motors. That little 3D printed bus right there next to you was one of their products. Yeah, that thing. One of the things that their engineering team always discussed was iterative design. You got an idea, work it, then work it again, and then work it again, and boil it down until it's exactly the thing you need it to be.
What's that term again?
Iterative design.
Iterative
like
design.
iterations.
Yeah, iteration. I like it.
So that, you know, I've got an idea in my head. I don't feel as if I'm comfortable putting it on paper yet. So I'm just going to think about it, and then think about it some more, and thinking about it another time, and then think about it tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day, until I've got something refined and distilled in my head that I feel comfortable, like, putting physical effort into it to make it happen.
this is something that I practice regularly. And anybody who knows me well knows exactly what I'm talking about. I have an idea. Now, like, again, earlier I mentioned that, like, creating ideas is also something you can get good at, right? So I get from point A to point Z of my creative process a lot quicker now. So people are like, you're a genius. I'm like, no, I'm just well practiced at refining my ideas.
I know how I like to work.
Exactly, right? But, like, one of the things that I do is, one, talk about it. You have an idea, talk about it with people you trust and care about, because someone might be able to help you level it up or smooth it out. And saying it out loud, if it sounds complicated when you're saying it,
even to an empty room,
it's going to be complicated.
Yeah.
If you can say your idea in the simplest way possible with people understanding it, you're going to refine the idea before you even start to make it. The other thing that I do with more involved projects that have a lot of working parts, it's not just me making a thing. It's like, I got to make this thing, but in order to make this thing, I need to get these people's permission and this person's help. And it's like all the working parts of a really large mural project or something like that. In my house, I have what I call the war room. Right? It's empty. It's my office at my house, and every wall has whiteboards on it. Right, I lined every wall with wipeable marker boards and a couple cork boards, and I write out my idea, whatever I want to call it. I write that at the top, and then I make a big list of all the steps I think that I now currently think that it'll take to get to the end result.
Which refines every time.
Refines it, yeah. And then I make a sidebar off of every step of all the things involved that it'll take to complete that step. It's like, okay, step one for a wall, it's like, find the person who owns the wall, right?
Which can be a terrible task all by itself.
Exactly. So it's like, how do I do that? I can knock on a door, or I can go through the city tax records, or like ask some people, like whatever. And then it's like, who do I know that might know? And I write those names down. It's like, okay, once I find out who has the wall and I get their permission, I'm going to need a contract for that, right? So it's like, okay, here's my contract and here's my insurance to prove that it's all like, so those are steps. And it's like, okay, how much material am I going to need for this wall? How much paint am I going to need? And it's like, all right, well, I know the wall is this size, because usually I know where it is first, right? So if the wall is this much square feet, then I'm going to need this much primer. That's a formula you can find out, but like knowing it, boom, okay, who's going to donate that primer? What store's got to hit up? Is it Lowe's? Is it Home Depot? Is it Sherwin-Williams? Is it Benjamin Moore? Like, who could I ask to donate? Granted, I have a nonprofit, so that helps, but like,
it definitely helps.
Yeah, but if they're not going to donate it, what's it going to cost? Okay, here's it, like, and you break it down into steps, but visually being able to see it helps you prioritize what needs to happen, and it makes it tangible where you can just cross it off of a list, right? And it's all in my head, but not just that one project. There's 100 projects, like you said, a lot of pokers in the fire, right? So like being able to put it out there and get it out of your head and see it makes it a tangible, real thing, and that's how you crush accomplishments. You know, I mean, you set a goal and you just cross it off the list, while all the other ideas are noodling around your head. But that's why every wall in that room is a whiteboard, because I put them all up there.
What's the notepad in your phone look like?
There's like 5,000 notes.
My phone looks so similar.
Yeah.
I had to ask. The notepad in my phone is filled with sketches of jewelry ideas and random bits of text that are correlated with the images in my mind.
So many.
Poetry. All the things.
All the above.
It all lands there. It all lands.
To-do lists. So many to-do lists. And then also my phone too, I'll see something, a number of a place or a person that I think might be useful, or like, that I want to connect with or network, and I'll like take a picture of it or screenshot it, or like a product that I think would be useful for a project. Like, so much is unorganized, which is why I have the war room, because I can sit back and see it all. And other people, when they walk in there, it looks like some crazy conspiracy theorists with like strings and everywhere. And they're like, you're out of your mind.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I'm not out of my mind. All of this is out of my mind now.
That's the thing that used to be in
here.
Yeah,
and I can see it.
Yeah.
And it really, it's something that I just started doing this year, and it's been really useful.
Excellent.
For larger projects.
So did you just not have anything that took the function of that beforehand? It was just
I would write it all down, but then I would lose the papers, and then I would just repeat things so much that other people would get inspired enough to like help me move it forward, because there's things you can't do on your own.
Truth.
And I think inspiration is a huge part of that. But if you're passionate about something, there are a lot of people out there that wish they had a passion for something, and they are willing to help you just to be close to it. And the most you can help to do is inspire them to pursue one of their own passions and return the favor when they need your help. You help them.
Yeah.
And that's how the nonprofit started. You know, like I had a whole lot of crazy ideas, and there was people who wanted help with them, and I'm like, sick. But then it's like, how can I help you with yours? Whatever it takes, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know. So I think it's interesting to have that community. Now, what you're saying, like, you're talking to artists around here in your city now, right? So, like, have you been building a community?
Definitely. And, you know, recently, as in this past First Friday, and if you're familiar with Knoxville, so you know what First Friday is. Yeah. Lots of cities across the country do it, but Knoxville's really proud of their First Fridays. I put together a show for First Friday that I've talked about till I'm blue in the face on the podcast, but since we're talking now,
lay it on me.
It's the Psych Show, and it is all of the psychedelic visionary art that the galleries around town don't want to show you because they're fucking pussies. To be blunt and crude about it, man, I've talked to just about everybody, and they've all said, "Well, we don't know if we want it. We're cautiously optimistic. It may not be sellable. Blah blah blah." All the excuses, I've gotten every single one of them in the book. So this was the first step of me trying to craft or create a metaphorical space specifically for this genre of art in town that is underrepresented. Knoxville is a wonderfully creative place. You know that. There's a stage every night to go see live music. There's places and bars and restaurants that display art all the time. But there's nowhere specifically this.
To get weird with it.
Yeah. And I hate it because at this point, like, everybody I know, and myself included, we're all tired of the shit you can get at Bed Bath & Beyond and Home Store and Pier 1, and like, that's
Hobby Lobby
bullshit,
and
dude. I am so passionately against all of that now that I have to do this. So this is Psych Show, and this is the first one. I hope it's a series. I'm currently looking for venues for Psych Show 2. But it's some of my friends that make similar art to myself, and some people I've met through the podcast that make art totally different. Like the piece you saw when you immediately walked through my door was a guest, Jen Lizzie. She's right now the most popular podcast as far as listens go, and she's become a good friend of mine and a creative co-conspirator, and I was privileged and honored to put her art on display next to people that also make crazy artwork. And I took this opportunity to make it a spectacle, because art is some degree of spectacle. And I did things with this show that I've never seen done around town. I put proper lighting on these pieces. And, you know, most bars around town, they have dim lighting, or restaurants, whatever. They've just got shit lighting for displaying art. So I took a buddy of mine and I said, hey, let's do this. And he's a live production lighting music gentleman, and
it's a good person to have in your network.
And you know, his day job is the sound guy at the Shed in Maryville, and he, like the back of his hand, he knows all these things. Yep. So I said, hey Preston, how do you feel about helping me do this? You know, if you lit this kind of artwork, blah blah blah. And he's done this for me in my own private shows for First Fridays before, so I knew he knew what was up when I asked him this question, and he just took no time at all to say yes.
It's what he does. He thinks it's effortless for him to think about, and he probably had a lot of fun using those skills in something he doesn't normally get to do.
Yeah, and
that's just a guess, but you tell me.
And you know, him being you know, one of my best friends. I've known him for over a decade, and we talk about art and music and creativity just in general quite a bit. And he's been on the podcast a few times, and we try to sit down every year and talk about where we've been and what we've done and what we want to do next. And you know, it's just one of those things that he's a creative collaborator that I've always felt comfortable working with. So I wouldn't have asked anybody else to do this. And he said yes, and we got the day, and we said, hey, let's meet at the bar at 9:30 to set up. And by God, he was there, and we did the damn thing. And that whole night, I got nothing.
Was it a one-night show?
Well, the art is still up, but the lighting and the spectacle of it was for that Friday night. Yeah. But it blew people's socks off, to be completely honest. Like, nobody had ever seen an art show like that for First Friday, and that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Sorry, I missed it.
Well, it's still up, and you can go by Next Level Brewing Company and see it whenever you like. You know, I felt accomplished in putting together these 6 artists, and I felt accomplished in presenting their artworks in a way that they deserve to be presented. And all the people that showed up really had their eyes open to how these artworks should be presented and how
what could be exposure.
Yes, exactly. And it was just one of those things where it's like, damn it, if I can't do this right, I'm not going to do it. And I need these people's help, and I want to do this with these people. And so far, I've got nothing but, rave reviews, and everybody was super thrilled to see artwork that they had never seen before. And I asked the artists that I had in this show, do you have any art you've never posted about? Do you have any art you've never displayed publicly? Do you want to make art specifically for this show? And they all said yes, yes, yes. So I put art, every single piece of art that was in that show, specific to this show, had never been shown in public before.
That's awesome.
And there are some pieces that had been laying around my house for years that had never been displayed in public, and those were in that show too. I wanted this to be as much a spectacle as possible. Not so much for the sake of spectacle, just because I knew it was worthy of said spectacle. Because these people are talented, and they deserve to have spectacle surround them. And I just needed to put it out there in a way that folks were entertained not only by what they saw, but the variety of what they saw. Because there weren't similar styles of artwork. Everybody was vastly different, but it all falls under the psychedelic surrealist umbrella.
This is 100% an opinion of mine, but I think I could back it up with some, see how you feel about it. So
yeah, shoot.
I think it is group shows are such an amazing opportunity for people to, one, build a network of like-minded people, some that they might not have known before, be exposed to work that is different than theirs, maybe inspiring them in a way or to level up. I think it's really important to have those shows. And as a producer of those shows, it's so important to have that vast variety of work in a collective, in a sense, right? A collective show. Then break it down, right? Find artists that could you can pair up, right? Because this is also how I feel about Freak Alley. I think Freak Alley, in the true sense of what it was before it got very curated, where it's it's a free place to go and express yourself and create public art, right? On a small scale. But you can make the dopest piece of art ever, and then it's slammed next to another really dope piece of art, and I think it can lessen the experience that your art should have.
Yeah.
Right? It's it's a shooting gallery, and it's sensory overload. Because you look at it and be like, oh, that's cool. And then you take a next step, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And you take another step, oh, that's cool. And everything becomes underwhelming.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's so much.
Yeah. Right? And I think group shows are really important for artists to meet each other. That's the usefulness of that. For the patron, for the person coming to just check it out, it can be really exciting if you put on a really good show as an experience, but the artwork itself might not stand out or have the same impact because it's around so much other cool shit.
Right.
Or whack shit, depending on the show. You know what I mean? And I think it's really good to have them, to get people to meet up, and then encourage artists, be like, hey, you two should collaborate. Plan a split show.
Well, there's
with a theme.
There's a collaboration in process right now between,
awesome. Yeah, between, what's what I'm saying. Yeah,
one of the people in the show and myself. And
so I think it's really important for you because you have the big picture. It sounds like it. You have the big picture of what this could be, and I think it's really important for you to keep pushing that envelope forward to inspire those smaller things. And once we're off air, I have some suggestions that'll bore every listener they have, but you might find interesting for that.
So one of the things I purposefully tried to do with this particular show was have a variety of art that none of it looked the same. Yeah. So, no matter where you look, you could pick out distinctly, this is this person's art, this is that person's art. These pieces over here belong to that artist. That was a stylistic choice for the show, as to try not to overwhelm people. Because if you have 10 pieces on the wall that all look similar,
into a collage. Yeah,
exactly. So I didn't want that, and I know that's a thing because I've seen people do it. I've experienced art shows like that. So I can't say there was an aspect of this show that didn't have a degree of thought and intent imparted to it. It's possibly one of the most energy and space and time, intentional, like buckets of energy and thought that I've, poured into in a long, long time.
Satisfying.
Oh
right?
God. It was amazing to see people that I didn't know walk through this show and go, oh shit,
I got a question for you.
Shoot.
You put in all of this thought, you put in all of this energy, it was successful. I'm sure you got a buzz off of that. How long did that last? That feeling of like...
I still feel it, but it's not the immediate rush. Like, it's not the immediate satisfaction.
Yeah.
But the knowledge of having that satisfaction is what I feel now.
I talk about this with a really good friend of mine, a really awesome artist. And her and I had talk about this. So, like, she's probably the most productive person I know. Makes me feel lazy, and I work all the time.
and to me, you're really busy.
Constantly producing. Like, it's in her output, her creative output is insane. It's insane. No, I don't know a single person that could keep up with how much work she makes. Most of it is small. Not that has anything to do with it. It's all at the same quality ever. Right. But like, I'm a big picture person. I'm a paint huge walls. I do huge tattoos. So like, since I met her, I'm like, go bigger. Right. And she's like, what? And then she did. Like, she like made like, it was like 11 by 17 canvas. And I'm like, go bigger. Because I bought her a 4x4.
Yeah,
right?
there you go. Yeah.
And then she got into painting murals, and it's like, bigger. And then last October, I got a giant warehouse space, and I'm like, we're doing a solo show in here. This whole space is make this space your world, right? Man. And I mean, I'm talking about like a 2,300 square foot, two-floored space.
I would die with that vacuum to
yeah,
fill.
no,
oh
it was a daunting challenge that she rose up to and murdered. Right, absolutely killed it.
That just
came out
so
cool.
much fun to me.
But so again, with all of these level ups in accomplishment, self goals that she set with a little prodding from me, but also the opportunities that have risen from that and from just her being an awesome artist. Every time you're done, and this is. I can vouch for this myself with every solo show that I had, every major project that I had. When I'm done, get a little feel good, get a little buzz, right? And
yeah.
I'm straight edge, so like this is the biggest drug for me is accomplishment, right? So you get a little buzz off of knowing you killed it, right? It's like killed it. Like I don't even care if a single and for me, it's usually the night before. I'm like, yep, once I see all the work on the wall or once it's finished, I'm like, I don't care if anyone shows up tomorrow at all. I did it.
Yeah, because you've done the thing you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there. It's up.
And then when everyone shows up, I just get to celebrate with them, right?
Yeah.
So every time that happens, I get a buzz. Every time another accomplishment I'm successful at, it lasts less. Like I build up a tolerance.
Oh yeah.
And then like, yeah. And like, sometimes it won't even last an hour now. Like I'll put a year's worth of work into a project and it will show and it'll be successful and everyone will love it. Maybe I sell things, maybe I don't, whatever. But like, I'm satisfied with my accomplishment. And then the next day, and people are like, oh, you like still talking about it. There's still like a public buzz of people like, giving me praise or asking me questions or like want to know about it. And I'm over it. And I already want to do something else. Right. And I'm like, and they're like, why can't you just like relax and enjoy this? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. I did yesterday, but like, I need something else right now. I'm such an addict when it comes to like accomplishments, big or small. And so I was talking about this with her and she's like, yeah, like after the last really big thing, she's like, what's next? Like, let's get back to work. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm, after the show, like how hungry you're for the next,
next
fix, the creative fix.
I am actively seeking venue for November. I understand as far as things go, that's very like short term,
man.
But I want to do 2 of these this year. And I planned this one from March or April. Like I've been thinking about this month's show since the spring, and I've thought about it every day. I've actively been in touch with most of these artists every week, and I said, hey, how you doing? Checking in, blah, 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 just being on base about it. And
which with creatives sometimes you need to, because we're evidently, slackers or in our own head.
We can be a little spacey sometimes, whatever. Luckily, this particular group of people was really on point and really excited and very actively engaged with me to make this happen, which is great, and wholly appreciated, because it wasn't just me pushing the ball up the hill, But that being said, I'm actively looking for places in November. I've talked to people, I've made phone calls, I've sent emails, and I did that the Monday after that first Friday. And I'm doing that on purpose because I know I need to.
Yeah.
And I also want to, because I want to have every bit of this buttoned up and organized, and I know ready to, hit go on it as soon as possible. I need to know that I've got everything, every detail of this locked down.
Where's it written down at? I don't see any whiteboards around here.
It's all up here. But it's metaphorically written down.
Yeah.
But I want to know I have all this wrapped up and can hit go and send the text messages and make the phone calls and say, hey, we're meeting at this time on this day. Let's hang our stuff and do the thing.
This leads me to another very interesting, creative talking point. Is the idea of sacrifice, right? I mean, this is a thing that is consequently exciting for you. This is what you want to do. You might not see it as a sacrifice, right? Of your time or your energy, because it's the work that it's going to take to get to the satisfactory level of pulling it off. But I think every creative endeavor, every even non-creative stuff, everything takes sacrifice.
Oh, for sure.
And being aware of those sacrifices, I think, as a creative is really important to be able to continue to produce work in a healthy way. It's okay, I have to dedicate this much time to this, but what doesn't get done? For me, as a child, I sacrificed the social life, you know what I mean? Which wasn't much of a sacrifice if I look back at it, but I still have friendships that I've had since I was a kid. They're still just as strong, but I sacrificed going to parties. I sacrificed relationships. Personally, I'm this isn't necessarily a good thing, but I have made it clear that a relationship is second to my career. And by my career, I don't mean just tattooing, but I mean producing artwork. My life's work.
Yeah.
And it's been a bitter conversation with a lot of people over the years, because they're like, what do you mean? I'm just even if we have plans, I will drop them on a dime if an opportunity to create work pops up. Because it's not you. It's not that you're less special or any of that, or that I care about you less. It's just I have made the sacrifice to dedicate my life and attention to this goal. Right.
So this now, I should be at a friend's house working on some stuff with him, because we have a weekly concurrent date where it's just we're going to sit down and talk about creative needs for his musical endeavors.
Yeah.
He's a local producer, promoter, blah, blah, blah. One of my best friends here in town. And I was like, hey, dude, I'm working on a podcast tonight, and this guest is kind of really cool, and I really want to do this thing. So I'm probably not going to make it for dinner and Creative Hanks tonight. And he gets it, man. He's tell me how it goes when you're done. Yeah. And that's a conversation I can easily have with him, but I can't easily have with everyone.
Right.
But he knows me and knows how I like to conduct myself in my creative efforts, so he's never going to step in front of me and say, hey, no, we got
it's surrounding yourself with people who understand your sacrifices.
Yeah. And luckily I have a very understanding social circle. My friends will a lot of the times bend over backwards to understand that I have a desire to create and do the damn thing, which I'm so privileged to have. And I will never say anything other than I'm privileged to have these people in my life. And they all know it. I've told them, hey, I'm really sorry I didn't make it to dinner with you and so, but I was in the middle of this painting. I was in the middle of sketching this thing out. I was in the middle of whatever it is. The podcast ran long, whatever. And they're like, well, you did the thing, right? And it turned out, and yes. And they're like, okay, cool. We can always get dinner some other time.
Right. I think my family were the ones that, growing up, they're I was just never there for the party, the birthday party, or the barbecue, because I had an appointment.
Yeah.
And they're like, why you never hang out? And I'm like, because I need to spend my time as efficiently as possible producing a thing.
Yeah.
And I, unfortunately, and this is something that I've had to like reflect upon and really like learn about myself, but I unfortunately only have time for those free time when I've worked myself to the bone and I crashed.
Yeah.
Right? When I'm burnt out and literally can't work anymore is when I have time to like go visit my parents or like go hit up a friend I haven't seen in a while. It's not that I don't want to do that all the time, but like...
But for you to feel okay being the person you are,
yeah,
that's how you have to operate.
Yeah. And I have also built a social circle of people that are also killers.
Yeah.
That just want to work all the time. So when we're together and we're hanging out, we're also making something.
Yeah.
You know?
Or we're ideating. We're talking about work.
Exactly.
You're doing this. I'm doing that.
Adding to that.
Yeah.
And like they're just as, just as successful. But I think I also have friends that I exhaust with like they enjoy it, they get inspired, they get fueled and empowered when they're around me. And then they're just like, all right, when can we stop? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like feel like a personal trainer. I'm like, come on, 4 more miles, let's go. And they're just like, fuck you. Like, I just want to drink a beer and watch TV. And I'm like, what? Why? And I forget that I'm exhausting.
Yeah.
So I think a stick and move is a good way for me to do that. Even with Knoxville, like I worked here 1 week every month, and like if it was more than a week, I'd probably drive everyone at work crazy. Like it's just they're like, oh, fuck, so glad to see you. Just, when are you leaving? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like most creative people have both of those people in their social circles.
I hope so.
Yes, sincerely hope so. But you know that those people are those people. You don't become surprised by those people's reactions on either side of that fence.
Yeah, that's true.
I've definitely talked people's ear off with paintings that I've been toiling around with for months, and they're like, "Are you ever gonna paint this damn thing? Or are you still like working it out? What the fuck are you doing with it?" Like,
yeah.
You've talked about this with me 6 times this month.
Yeah,
like, where's it?
Putting in work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do work is my friend that I mentioned earlier. Sea of Doom is her art handle, and Doom and I like we're just nonstop. It's just nonstop, but we're also slightly competitive, right?
Which is healthy.
It's healthy.
To a
Yeah,
point.
yeah. We're very competitive, and we just both want to see each other succeed.
Yeah.
But we don't want to out succeed. Like it's like, oh, you made one thing, fuck you. Like
I'm gonna do it just like this.
Yeah, but like I can't keep up with her because of like tattooing and like everything else I do. So I'm like, all right, you stacked them this month, but I'm gonna do a 3-story mural, and then like it'll even out.
Yeah, man.
You win. I have to tell her all the time.
I've got a buddy right now that's been doing some stuff that I've never seen before. He's been dyeing his his disc golf discs. I've never seen anybody do that, and he was showing me some stuff when I was over at his house the other day. I was like, "How did you? What the fuck?" And he's like, "Man, it just came to me one day, or I saw somebody do it, and I had to do it." And I was just like, "All right, And he does some crazy stuff with his paintings, and he and I will talk about the crazy stuff we're both trying to do. And he's also one of the guys in the Psych show right now. And we're also such good co-collaborators or co-conspirators in this creative game that I never feel jealous or upset or any type of negative way about the thing he's trying to do, and he never feels that way about the thing I'm trying to do. We just both feel privileged that we're comfortable enough to have these conversations about where our heads are at.
This makes me think of something that I've talked about many times before with friends, and Philly, right? I don't know if you've ever been to my city.
It's on the list.
It is a hard place. It's hard. People in Philly are hard, mean, It's dirty. I love it. I love how many problems our city has, because if there's a problem, there's something for me to solve. Gives me something to do. But Philly is fuck you, you suck. Right? It is there is a northeast negativity that is in our bones, where people are like, fuck you, you suck. Right? Now, I've also lived in Austin. And Austin, Texas is like, what's up, man? You're awesome. Right? And I've been to Portland, and Portland's like, we're all awesome. And we're like, yeah, okay. Like, granted, these are like cliche stereotypes I'm playing on, but when I lived in Austin for 5 years, and I was extremely underwhelmed by the amount of art being created there. Tattoo-wise, they're just killers. But other art-wise, few and far between of people that really stood out as, like, unique or interesting.
Yeah.
Granted, there was a lot of people doing cool shit, but, like, really just unique and interesting. Not, like, few and far between. And when I was in Portland, I was, again, extremely underwhelmed by the amount of just, like, really awesome, thought-provoking, just, like, next-level stuff. And I'm not knocking the art I saw. There's a lot of really good art. But I was, like, surprised by it. Because in, like, Philly, everywhere you turn, there's just, like, a killer, right? And you're just like, damn. Whoa, right? Like, you're just, like, impressed and, like, you almost can't conceive, like, how a person did that. Here's my theory on it. Places like Austin and Portland that have a very supportive community. It's a very supportive community. And I think it is a beautiful, wonderful thing. I'm not knocking that. Where everyone's like, let's all help each other. Let's all, like, what do you need? Like, let's do a thing. And it's cool. And everyone's like, hey, look what I did. And be like, oh, man, that's awesome. Look what I did. And they're like, yeah, that's awesome. No one's pushing each other to get better. They are. Everyone's trying to be the best that they can be. But in Philly, you can do something that you really care about, put a lot of time, and people be like, fuck you, that sucks. You suck. Even if it doesn't,
right.
You're going to say that shit. And then you go, no, fuck you, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to, one of two things is going to happen. You're going to get so discouraged that you're going to stop trying, which just means you get out of the way of the other people that are going to level up, or you're like, fuck you, I'll show you, right? And then you do something even cooler. And then someone's like, fuck you still suck.
Well, dude, that's part of the reason I had to put this show together. Like, I am pissed that no, like, established place wanted to help me put this show on. So I had to do things.
Prove them wrong in spite.
Yeah. And I don't, I hate operating out of spite. That's definitely not
probably not healthy.
It's not a characteristic.
But you're probably going to
me.
make some cool shit.
Right. It's not a characteristic of myself I like to exemplify or, put a lot of energy into. But I'll be damned. These people deserve a venue just like everybody else, especially when you've got, juried galleries and very established places that show art and have shown art for years and years and years. And here you go tell me that you don't want to show my shit after you've shown all that shit. What the fuck? So here I go. Watch me. And I did it. And I'm still doing it. So I had to.
In Philly, you're going to hear fuck you, you suck enough that you're either going to stop caring about fuck you, suck because you don't.
Yeah.
Or you're going to try so hard, and this isn't about appeasing other people, but it's just about getting annoyed at someone enough to be like, you want to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to you're going to push through so hard, continuously creating shit. Someone's going to be like, fuck you, sucker. You're like, fuck you. And they'll be like, you're all right. You know what I mean? But by the time it takes you to get there, for people to be like, you're all right, you're going to have produced so much awesome work that everyone's going to fucking know.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to know who you are, because it's not just what you're creating that they admire in Philly. It's your tenacity to create.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, with all of the problems that our city has and all of the shit weighed against you and all the people discouraging you, you were like, nah, I'm going to do it. And that is what I think in the Northeast they respect more than anything. It's just how hard you can be in, like, standing your ground and putting in work.
Well, I had a specific conversation with a person that opened a new gallery here in town recently. Names will not be said.
I wouldn't know them anyway. Go ahead.
But they told me that they didn't really think that my work is sellable, and that's not really something that they wanted to put into their gallery as, to oversimplify our conversation, which was cordial and polite and mostly professional.
And with a gallery, that, I mean, they got to make money. They have rent to pay.
And I totally
posting
understand.
Something that's sellable is on top of their mind.
And I totally understand. Like, I'm not ignorant to that viewpoint, because business is business at that point. But straight up telling someone that you don't believe that there's a customer for their artwork, I think is downright foolish. Like, they essentially said that their square footage is, or my work isn't worthy of their square footage. And I bid this show and I sold 2 pieces.
That's what's up.
So fuck them. Like I did the thing they said I couldn't or shouldn't be doing. And that's enough for me to be like, fuck you, I'm going to do it twice. And so I did. I sold 2 pieces at the sock show, and that was enough. That was enough for me to technically be correct and then do it again.
Right.
So
they keep doing it.
Yeah.
And then there'll be so much of demand that galleries will be asking you to show.
And hopefully that happens. But if not, I'm not going to stop. All right, so where were we? We were doing the thing talking about fuck you, I sold shit, and
fuck you suck, and it's like fuck you, no I don't.
And then doing the damn thing either way. So Philly really put that in you, huh?
I mean, I don't know if it's just a Northeast mentality, but it's I've traveled all over the country, all over the world, and it's something that I think is a specific mentality in Philly because it's just like it's just a hard place.
I'm inclined to agree with you because I know people really well from New York, and they would say the same shit you just said about the Northeast. So I don't have
it's part of our charm.
Yeah. she's pretty rough around the edges. So yeah, like she would definitely agree with those statements for sure. She's always talked about how like nosy people are in the South, just like the casual conversation people get into around here is rude as shit if you were to ask that to somebody in New Jersey or Philly or New York.
I think it's more, I mean, like I've spent a good amount of time in the South too, and I think it's more just like, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's like, you're asking, but like, what do you want? Just get to the point.
Yeah.
We got shit to do. We got things to do. We got places to go. Come on, move it. What? But I think that's just because, especially in Philly, like we all live in row homes, so we literally have neighbors on the other side of every wall.
Yeah.
And you just get used to being like, stay in your lane and grinding.
Yeah.
So.
I can't say the slower pace of life in East Tennessee hasn't benefited me, but I'm sure I could benefit with a bit more of that kick in the ass, go do shit.
I think it takes a balance.
Yeah.
But that only comes with exposure.
It does.
So
it definitely does. Man, you said you need to split, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. This has been like an hour and 40 minutes or whatever, which is a little longer than I normally go.
Hey, it's a good conversation.
It was a great conversation. I'm really excited and privileged to have it, so thank you for your time, your energy, your willingness, and enthusiasm to do the damn thing with a stranger from the internet.
Anybody who wants to check out my work online,
plug your stuff.
My Instagrams are my name, Evan Lovett. That's my tattoo Instagram. And then Evan Lovett _art is mostly my murals and my other art. So if you want to see the plethora of what I do, check that out. Also, whenever I am here in Knoxville, I'm tattooing at Born This Way Body Arts on Kinsing Pike. So I come through every couple months for about a week or so.
And where can they find this Vert?
Vert.creative on Instagram, or vert.creative, or vertcreative.org is our website.
Excellent.
So check that out too.
I'm definitely going to check that out, because if I was exposed to that in my schooling career, I would have greatly appreciated it. So I'm definitely going to tell some folks about it.
Right on.
Like I said, man, I really appreciate your time, your energy, your enthusiasm. I appreciate and enjoy your creative output. Thank you so much for being the person you are and being willing to do the shit that you do. It is greatly appreciated. My name is Thomas Zachary. This has been the KAAMP. If you want to support the show, you can buy some of my art like those 2 wonderful people did at the show. You can listen to the podcast. You can share the podcast. You can do all that jazz. Put it in your damn ear holes. And thank you. And thank you for listening. And I hope you enjoy. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.